Hi, I'm Phil Harbell, and this is my 30th video discussing 1950s British science fiction paperbacks. For this video, I thought I'd show some of the rarest and most interesting and most significant and important books of the mushroom period. And this one will concern the book published by John Spencer and Company Limited. Now, those of you who remember my earlier videos will recall that I've pinpointed John Spencer as being one of the worst ever publishers responsible for a load of mushroom rubbish, and that's so. But it must be said that sometimes John Spencer published some good stuff, as we'll find out when we investigate the curious case of E.C. Tubb and Supernatural Stories number 9. So far, I've barely touched on many of the myriad titles issued by John Spencer and Company Limited for the very good reason they're simply not worth the candle. But because adverse circumstances caused some good authors to be obliged to sell to them, they did produce the occasional gem and some very good work, despite their editorial malpractices. In earlier videos, I've shown you how and why nearly all the post-war mushroom publishers went out of business in the mid-1950s. E.C. Tubb was one of the full-time authors who turned to writing westerns following the collapse of his regular science fiction book markets, just after he'd bought a new house. One of the few mushroom publishers who survived was the firm of John Spencer. Are John Spencer's. A fact not without irony, since they had published some of the poorest and crappiest material. Perhaps the fact that they had paid the lowest rates and so had a healthy cost-profit ratio enabled them to weather the storm. Although they dropped the dreadful science fiction line, they continued to publish westerns and other genre novels. Tubb had been interested in and had read a lot of authentic Western history, especially about the Civil War, and like most people in the UK in the 1950s, he'd seen lots of Hollywood Westerns. So he was able to make a seamless transition from science fiction to Westerns. Between 1955 and 1956, in order to meet his new mortgage, Tubb sold Spencer's 13 paperback novels, 1 detective, a foreign legion, and 11 westerns, which we see here. The covers were painted by several artists and vary from pretty good to barely adequate. See here our old friend Ray Theobald's inability to draw horses. His wretched animals look more like reindeer than horses. But on the plus side, we also find one of Ron Turner's rare Western covers, making this book a real collector's item. Because of Spencer's low payment rates, only half that of Tubb's former publishers, they had to be written quickly. But by 1955, Tubb had mastered the art of speed writing without any appreciable decrease in quality, and all these books are excellent. For many years, because they were all under pseudonyms and house names, Tubb's authorship remained unknown, and the books remained in limbo. But their quality was such that when I became Tubb's agent more than 40 years later, I was quickly able to resell all of them. The westerns, with some title changes, first went to Robert Hale's famous hardcover Black Horse series, and then to Ulverscroft Linford Western paperback series. Here we see the one. There's the Linford series, and there's Robert Hale's Western series. Just two examples of how all these books were reprinted. The good news is that all 11 westerns are actually still in print today under Tubb's own name and available online as Pioneering Press, now Loom Books paperbacks and e-books. You can see them here underneath. These are all currently available on Amazon. Although they have mediocre silhouette covers, which I personally don't like at all, they are well produced otherwise. Well produced, and at just £5 or £6 each, they're absolute bargains. You can check out their many favourable reviews on Amazon. I recommend them to all fans of the author. Amongst many fine titles, Cauldron of Violence stands out. This book's opening sequence, telling of a young boy witnessing the violent and horrifying murder of his mother, setting him on a path of revenge, served as Tubb's inspiration for his later historical masterpiece, the Atlas the Gladiator trilogy. Here we see the books that were inspired by that novel, the Roman historical series, Tubb's masterpiece. It belongs in any Tubb fans collection, and these three books, which form a complete novel, are currently only available in these Wildside editions. Now then, let's get to the real subject of this video, which was Tubb's connection with Spencer's supernatural stories. It will become clear in just a moment. Here we go. Supernatural stories number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, supernatural stories number 5, number 6, 7, and 8. Now then, back in the day, finding their science fiction line failing, Spencer decided to try publishing supernatural fantasy, commissioning their best regular writer, John Glasby, to write entire issues of the new paperback magazine, Supernatural Stories. But late in 1955, after 8 issues, which you see here, all of them written by John Glasby, apart from a tiny handful of filler stories by Tony Glynn and Lionel Fanthorpe. See the filler story that wasn't by Glasby, and the Tony Glynn story in that one. Otherwise, all the stories are by John Glasby, apart from the fillers by Glynn and Fanthorpe. So Spencer's decided to switch the versatile Glasby to writing other, better-selling genre lines for them. We see these 8 issues here, all with entertaining stories by the talented Glasby, under a plethora of personal pseudonyms. You can see all these pseudonyms, which became quite well known because he used them frequently thereafter. The covers were by the second banana artist, Gerald Facey, and our old friend Ray Theobald. But they were luridly colourful, and they were a hell of a lot better than much of their science fiction work. The best cover, of course, was number 6, the only cover painted by Ron Turner. After John Glasby became my client, I was able to publish several collections of his best stories from supernatural stories, as well as all of his science fiction, western and detective books. And when the reprints ran out, John wrote for me many new stories and books. Here we see just a couple of examples of his many books which are available online. You need to check them out. Check John Glasby. All of his books are available online and they're all readable. Spencer's approached Tubb to take over from Glasby, commissioning him to write an entire issue of supernatural stories as a tryout. Tubb had already been writing fantasy stories for John Cornell's magazine, Science Fantasy. See here. Tubb was an experienced fantasy writer when Spencer's approached him, and so was well versed in the medium. He duly quickly delivered to Spencer an entire issue consisting of 6 stories under 6 pseudonyms to protect his appearance in other higher paying magazines. Spencer's were delighted with this sample issue, and in sending him their modest check, they asked Tubb to take over the magazine after switching Glasby to their war, detective, foreign legion, romance and western novels. But they received a shock when Tubb refused their offer. As Tubb explained to me, at the time Spencer's were a low-paying market and I was about to be appointed as the editor of Authentic Science Fiction magazine. I was also doing a full-time job, which only left the evenings and weekends free. Weekends meaning half-day Saturday and all-day Sunday, during which time I tried to hit higher paying markets. I informed Spencer's that I could not submit any further supernatural or other material to them, as I was concentrating on science fiction, which offered a wider and more lucrative field. With Glasby now tied up on other genres, and having lost his replacement, Spencer's reaction was immediate. They suspended publication of supernatural stories. So at first, it looked as if Tubb's 6 stories were fated never to be published. But it was not until the spring of 1957 that Supernatural Stories number 9 finally appeared, an old Tubb issue. By then, Spencer's had introduced their Badger books in print and relocated their London editorial office from a spare room in a second-hand clothes shop on Shepherd's Bush Road to their own better offices on Brackenbury Road. In that interval, the publisher had also made certain of a steady supply of fiction by securing the services of ultra-prolific writing machine Lionel Fanthorpe. And he, together with occasional appearances by the indefatigable John Glasby, seeking a respite from writing most of Spencer's war, romance and western novels, would continue to write entire issues of supernatural stories for the next 10 years. Now, Supernatural Stories number 9 was of excellent quality and ensured that the new run of the magazine got off to a successful start. Let's see the contents page. As a paperback, this issue was technically Tubb's first ever collection and has become a much sought after collector's item for those aware of its significance. Even Theobald's cover was one of his better efforts, though marred by the mushroom speciality of quoting a non-existent James Stanton on the cover. Inside, the Devil's Dictionary was actually attributed to Edward Richards. The back cover was a tasteful house ad seeking subscriptions, a welcome relief from tobacco, Cornish pixies, pimple cream and jock straps. Today, this book is fantastically rare, and despairing Tubb collectors the world over have been searching unsuccessfully for it ever since Tubb's ownership of its 6 non-deplumed stories became generally known in 1959. That was when Mike Ashley and myself published the first ever complete bibliography of Tubb in the Canadian magazine Science Fiction Collector, issue number 7, which you see here. There we have it, starting a complete collection of all Tubb stories. And on the magazine listings, which you see here, the first revelation of Tubb's authorship of these stories. That set the hair running. The good news for fans of the author is that 4 of the 6 stories were reprinted for the first time in my 2003 Tubb collection, Mirror of the Night, by the prestigious Sarab Press in Wales, in both deluxe and regular hardcovers and the paperback edition. There's the paperback edition. And here's the deluxe hardcover. A very nice book, made especially valuable by being autographed by all the contributors to the issue. And there you see the John Spencer stories in the contents panel. This book has itself been subsequently reprinted by Wildside Press in 2011 in a very nice edition, which we see here. That's the Wildside reprint of that. And then I included the 2 remaining Spencer novels in a second Wildside collection, The Devil's Dictionary. Let's see here. There you can see the two missing stories. So all of the stories are currently in print in these 2 collections. But for the true collector, Supernatural Stories number 9 is the hidden gem they need to search for. And for that, they'll need a lot of luck and very deep pockets.